I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with our distinguished panelists. And today we're talking about cross-sector collaboration and promoting education worldwide. Our magazine covers cross-sector collaboration as a magazine for the social sector. So I wanted to begin by asking our panelists sort of to introduce themselves to the audience by talking about their work in cross-sector collaboration and education. So let me begin with high-level envoy, Tiam, to talk about your work in cross-sector collaboration and education.
Thank you, David. Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues. May I first offer my condolences on the tragic event in Hong Kong last week. We must hope and wish that such a tragedy may never happen again, either in Hong Kong or anywhere in the world. It's an honor for me to join you today for this important conversation. Allow me to extend my congratulations to the Eden Prize Foundation, leadership and team for centering this year's summit on education at a crossroads. Education is the ultimate driving force for social and economic development. But we are indeed at a crossroads, and we need to think afresh about which path to take. In a world of competing priorities and limited resources, putting education front and center demands new thinking and shared responsibility. As a former Minister of Education in Senegal, and now a high-level envoy for the Global Partnership for Education, I have seen firsthand what it takes to build a path to transform education systems, including the power of co-creation and partnerships. No single player in any sector can deliver transformative change alone. True and lasting progress in education is built through synergy. When government, philanthropy, civil society, the private sector, and others join forces to turn ambition into results. At GPE, we have made that principle the anchor of our vision. Our model is a country-led, efficient, scalable, and resilient platform where collaboration fuels change. Thank you very much for this first question, David.
Thank you. Dr. Savage, you're now at the International Education Funders Group, Executive Director. So tell us about your experience in cross-sector collaborations.
So I started my career working out of a Ministry of Education in Malawi, and my job was to coordinate in the sixth year of planning to get a sector plan on the table that was supported by every actor, right? And I started out supporting the director of planning where every other director across the ministry had their hand up to say, I need money, I need attention in that sector plan, still after 6 years of planning. And every funder around the table had their specific thing that they wanted to make sure was in that plan. And that was 20 years ago, astonishingly. Today, we're in a world where ministers of education have not only 20 funders around the table, more likely perhaps 2 or 3, but a whole host of foundations and businesses as well. And the coordination challenge is, I think, a lot harder today. So Over the years, I've worked in various different ways to enable that coordination. I've come to treat the word collaboration with a little bit of skepticism. But now, at the International Education Funders Group, work with 100 different philanthropic organizations of all shapes and sizes, all working for education in weak education systems, and try to enable their desire to work better together with each other and with other actors within the ecosystem. Because as Mr. Thiam just said, no one can do this alone. No one can tackle the complexity of even the most basic education challenges alone.
Thank you. Dr. Marteru, as Chief Program Officer with the MasterCard Foundation and other experiences in collaboration, tell us about your experience.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, let me say thank you to Eden Prize Foundation for getting us together here. This is collaboration. This is a way for us to share what we've been doing, what we know, so that we can all get inspired from it. So collaboration is absolutely necessary. It's not an option, it's an imperative given the size of the challenge. That's the first point. Now, on our side, MasterCard Foundation, we believe strongly in collaboration because we know we cannot do anything without collaboration. But it's beyond collaboration in funding. It's about collaboration with those on the ground who are working hard to deliver education. It's about collaboration with the governments, collaboration with the private sector, collaboration with communities, collaboration with other organizations that are already implementing. And for us, we see our role as enabling those who are already doing the work to do it more deeper, but also at a larger scale. And we have a number of examples of this. In the higher education space, for example, through the Scholars Program, we work with a network of institutions globally to enable young people from marginalized communities access quality education, but also develop leadership skills so that they can emerge as leaders of change in their communities, in their countries, in their families. Yeah. More recently, we have what we call higher education collaboratives, where institutions of learning come together around a specific challenge. For example, the point around digital we're talking about today. We have one of those, agri-food systems, and develop and devise solutions to real challenges that in the sector that are relevant to Africa in this particular case that we're talking about. And in Canada, collaboration with indigenous communities to turn around the fortunes of young people in the indigenous communities so that they can become leaders of change in their communities. So that is one dimension that is so important beyond the collaboration among us as funders, which is what people talk about a lot. Yeah? And so for us, this is a topic that is really core to how we work.
Thank you. So I'd like to delve more deeply into the state of cross-sector collaboration today. It's a source of social innovation that we cover at our magazine. We recently published a piece on Teach at the Right Level Africa in our latest issue by Ashley Morrell. So I'd like to ask, how successful, if we think of ourselves as living in an era of cross-sector collaboration, how successful has cross-sector collaboration been in improving education worldwide? Well, I'd like to start with Dr. Savage. You said you were a bit of a skeptic on collaboration, so
yeah.
Maybe you could elaborate.
I guess I'm always the no person in the room, and I feel they need to change that. But I hear the word collaboration a lot. I hear it celebrated a lot. And yet, over the course of my career, I have remained convinced that one of the reasons we haven't made as much education progress as we could have done is because the systems, structures, processes, and power inherent in the funding architecture creates mindsets and behaviors that pull against collaboration and encourage competition. I've experienced that as a funder. I was a funder for 15 years. And if I didn't release the funding for education, if I didn't claim that those programs, internally, if I didn't claim that those programs had achieved great success, I'd go back to HQ and would lose that education money. It would go to something else. So there's deeply embedded competition, I think, and power dynamics that I see in almost every forum that I walk into. I think this year is a very interesting year because there has been a seismic shift to the funding landscape. And I think I hear and see lots more thinking about, well, how is that going to change, including both within the education sector and between education and other sectors. I think there's recognition now more than ever that we don't and won't have enough money for all the sectors that we talk about the 97 billion needed for the education gap, that we need to work much more intelligently across sectors. And within philanthropy, we talk a lot about philanthropy being a bridge that can break down some of the silos, where we can bring climate and education, bring food and education much more cleverly together by not pitching one against the other and not shouting as education ourselves. So there's hope. I don't want to be the only, but I do believe it hasn't worked well enough so far, and we don't have that synergistic sense of mission, prioritization, and sequencing to make sure that education progress can be made, because we can do a lot better than we've done.
Dr. Muteru and Envoy TM, is that true in your experience, these dysfunctional power dynamics with funders?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure about that, about dysfunctionality, but what I would say is collaboration, as I said earlier, is not a choice. It is an imperative. We have to. We have to. What I would say is the challenge is our effort has always been more around collaboration to pool funds, to put funds into one pot for a purpose. But I think there could be a different way to look at it, which works better. And this is about collaboration around a challenge. For example, we have a challenge of young people out of school, 180 million in Africa. That is the point of collaboration. We want to give an opportunity to these young people to come back into the mainstream and complete their education. Now, we don't have to put the money in one pot, but rather agree on what we need to do to address that challenge, but each one using the means that you have to make that happen. I think that kind of collaboration model, in my view, works better. Complementarity around a common purpose, a common goal, a common set of outcomes, and less about pooling funds in one pot. And I think what I see with the Global Partnership for Education, which the Honorable Minister has been leading as a global envoy, is very much along those lines, different actors around that common purpose, working closely with government and others on the ground who are implementing for the purpose of enabling. Initially, it was all about access, now the quality agenda as well, and so on. I think we need to look at the model and think more about what we are trying to achieve and less about which pot the money is coming from.
Yes, I can give perhaps the example of the Global Partnership for Education. We try to promote a local education group in every country under the leadership of the government. Around the table of the local education group, you have the government, you have the Minister of Finance, you have the local communities, you have the local government also, you have the civil society, you have the association of teachers, of parents of students, and you have also the bilateral and multilateral funders. But what is important for education transformation in a country, for me, is the government leadership is essential. When government set clear priorities, align partners, and co-create evidence-based reform, it creates a virtuous circle. Less duplication, more impact. I saw this firsthand as Minister of Education in Senegal through our national reading program. In French, it is Lecture pour tous. We brought partners together regularly around one table, shared by the Ministry of Education, with a clear plan and political commitment. And the result is a 40% increase in reading proficiency in just 2 years. That's what alignment and collaboration can deliver in a concrete example in Senegal.
Thank you. So I want to turn to the seismic shift that Dr. Savage mentioned. In many ways, we're living in a post-aid world. The United States is one of a host of countries that have withdrawn or backed off of foreign aid. So I want to know, what does this mean for the education collaboration space, this new era? And are there any silver linings that you might see from this? Envoy Thiam.
Yes, in a post-aid world, collaboration for me must evolve beyond traditional donor-driven models. It's not just about governments or donors. It's about building a system where every stakeholder is accountable. First, I think that sustainable financing must be at the center. I mean, education needs predictable, long-term investment, not just from donors, but mainly from domestic budgets. For example, in Senegal, 92% of the expenses of education comes from domestic budgets. Government must position education as a strategic policy in the fiscal framework of the country. Global financing should complement, not replace, domestic effort. That is exactly what GPE 2030 and its global financing campaign aims to do. And philanthropy is powerful when aligned with public and multilateral efforts. It brings more than money. Philanthropy brings agility, innovation, networks, sometimes the willingness to take risks. And I think that we have many philanthropic partners here, and they are part of sustainable finance for education.
Dr. Savage, what do you think about this seismic shift?
So I think we're only starting to see the impact of it. I see the aid cuts as a symptom as well as a cause of change. And I think even there, we've seen not only aid cuts, but education disproportionately singled out, perhaps, by some governments, and represented in some media outlets as being less worthy of aid or less demonstrative of impact through aid. So I think there's a wake-up call for us as an education community. I think a lot of the organizations affected are desperately trying to kind of work out what next, work out what the impact of the cuts, trying to keep going on sort of shoestrings, and we're really going to see that roll out next year, I think, in particular. So I think in a way we're at the very start of seeing how it's going to change, and I think there's a lot of predictions. We're hearing a lot of predictions as to the increased role of capital, private capital, as Martha mentioned earlier, as to the role of governments, and this being an opportunity for governments to sort of be free from the neo-colonial shackles despite the heavy amounts of debt still tied to their ministries of finance. We see a lot of discourse in philanthropy about localization and the potential, particularly interpreted as civil society and grassroots action, as different from government leadership. So I think there's still a lot to come, and certainly within the philanthropy world, we're seeing a vibrant debate about what some of those terms mean. What does it mean to be locally led? How can we be more evidence-driven in a world of scarcity? What for equity? You know, with less money, whether to focus on those who are most marginalized versus trying to pull, maybe not pool, but pull some of the funding together. So I've been told off a number of times this year for saying we're beyond aid, because there will be evolutions in the way that the high-income countries tackle the poly crisis and the funding and the foreign policy related to that. So the concepts and the mindsets of aid are still lingering, very much still lingering, but we're certainly starting to have some of the conversations about what comes next.
Dr. Matero?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think it is expected that as countries that are receiving aid get stronger, that the amount of aid would go down. That would not be unexpected. What has not been accepted, what you're calling seismic shift, is what I would consider the irresponsible way in which it was done, the latest one. And it's not the only country in the world that has been reducing aid. In fact, if you look at the European countries, including the EU, the total amount of reduction between 24 and 28, 29 is larger than what the US removed. But it is the way that the US took the action that has really become of a problem to countries. Yeah. Now, having said that, I think it is also an opportunity for countries to think more carefully about how to focus more and use local resources better. I think it is an opportunity, and we're seeing that happening. Countries are asking themselves, how can we do this in a different way? Yeah, how can we use the resources we have better? Yeah, so hopefully something positive will come out of that, which will help countries manage their own resources better, and perhaps take control of the agenda better. Because in some cases, as many of you know, aid comes with situations that may make it difficult for countries to implement their own national strategies. So this is a window again for countries also to focus on their own strategies better and to take control of their destiny. Yeah.
May I
Go
add
ahead.
that because for the next replenishment for GPE, our aim is to collect $5 billion. But in order to unlock $10 billion by the mechanism of multiplier. For example, we have this example of multiplier in Malawi with philanthropic partners. GP put on the table $1 and the philanthropic $1. It was with this blended finance that we achieved to improve education in Malawi. And this example was duplicated in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Lesotho. And that's what collaboration in financing can achieve.
So I want to turn to talk about Africa and about demographics. So unlike many different countries, including the United States, where we're seeing an older demographic, where there's a concern whether there are enough young workers to pay for the social services expected for an aging population. By contrast, Africa is by 2050 going to have the largest young workforce in the world. It's a wonderful opportunity to invest in this young workforce through education. It's also a challenge because there's going to be many young people who need education to have fulfilling lives that they need. So, Dr. Matero, where would you say we are with regard to addressing this challenge of demography in Africa with many young people who need education, and where do we need to be by 2050?
Yeah, thank you. I think you framed it well. It's true that Africa has the largest population of young people today, and it's going to continue for some time. But I must also say that the window is closing fast. Like every continent, this youth bulge does pass. And so the need to do more and to do it faster is right here with us today. Africa has made impressive progress in getting young people into school. If you look at the progress at which Africa has been able to increase enrollment in schools from the days when many of them became independent, which is just over 60 years ago, until now, that rate of increase of enrollment is the fastest ever that has happened in any continent in the world, meaning so many kids in such a short period of time. So there is a positive story to be told. Now that has come with an impact on the quality of learning, which we know, and we are all talking about foundational learning needs to be strengthened. That is true, and it would be expected with that rapid growth. But there is more than that. It is not only about getting young people into school and then out into the street. It's ensuring that young people actually benefit from that education. Yes, as responsible citizens, but also very importantly, that they transition into meaningful work, what we call in my organization, dignified and fulfilling work, meaning work that has dignity, that gives the individual dignity, but also earns the individual enough to meet his or her own needs and those of his or her own family. Now, that is where we have a lot of challenges right now. Usually, the global community will see it in the HDI index that the UNDP publishes. 55% right now for Africa against the global 75%, meaning only about half of the young people in Africa are achieving their full potential in life, compared to a 75%, meaning 7+ people out of 10 are achieving their full potential. So we have a lot more to do. We have a lot more to do to improve education outcomes for young people. And my foundation, the Mastercard Foundation, has taken it as its commitment to focus on young people in Africa, not only in education and skilling, but to accompany young people from where they are in education and skilling through transitions into the world of work. But defining world of work in a different way, because the reality is only 2 to 3 out of 10 of those who come out of the education system every year are actually finding formal wage employment. And so it is more about doing things on the demand side to open up more opportunities for young people. It means investing in entrepreneurship, investing in financial inclusion to make sure that all can participate, and unlocking barriers in the system, barriers of policy, barriers of regulatory regimes, mindsets, access to markets, access to inputs, access to finance, so that young people can have more opportunity. So that is work which yet it needs to be done. We are starting in that direction, and we would like to see that many more of us come in. I'm glad to see that some of the big organizations in the world, I won't mention names here, which never used to talk about enabling work for young people, are now talking about it. So something is happening. We need to do more of that. Thank you.
As a former minister of education, where are things and where do they need to be, say, in the next decade?
I can say that Africa youth, for me, is not a challenge. It's our greatest asset. But assets only yield returns when you invest. And education is that investment. This is not just an African issue. For me, it's a global opportunity. by 2050, Africa will have the largest workforce on the planet. The question is, will it be the most skilled workforce? That depends on what we do now on education.
Absolutely. Dr. Savage, Aditi?
Maybe an observation on that investment, because we know, I mean, the difference per child of investment per year in any country in Africa compared to the investment in Hong Kong or Singapore is worlds away, right? The world at the moment is looking to philanthropy for answers on some of that investment, and there are some incredible catalytic ways that philanthropy can invest. About 60% of IEFG members focus predominantly in Africa, and that's, I would say, it's a very biased sample of global philanthropy. It's a community that has sort of naturally, organically come together. But even then, when we mapped out last year education philanthropy in Africa, we're not talking about Africa. We're talking about South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, a handful of countries where there's philanthropic investment, but the vast majority of the continent receives no philanthropic investment at all. Remittances, yes. Education remains the single highest investment of remittances, and in parts of the continent, religious giving is very high. But whenever we talk, the sort of, again, I don't want to be the negative person, but some of the conversation we hear around AI and around the potential for education, the stark reality of many classrooms in conflict-affected, climate-affected parts of Africa where 9 out of 10 kids cannot read a basic sentence, despite the fact that we now do have progress in paying attention to foundational learning, and we do have recognition of some of the very specific things that we can do fairly quickly to improve literacy rates. Still, there's a long way to go, and I'm not seeing yet how we turbocharge the progress across the continent in order to get beyond that.
Yeah, if I can add to that point, when we talk about investing in education in today's terms, there's a lot of emphasis on foundational learning, which is important. That's where it all starts. But for a continent like Africa, to get out of this vicious circle, economies must grow. And so investing not only in basic education, but very importantly to go to secondary and tertiary education, because it's about transforming economies. It's education for socio-economic transformation, not only as a social sector. And so transforming economies, meaning building those capabilities to go from primary production to value-added products and services. And that's where tertiary becomes very important. I know some out there would think it's a luxury. It is not. It is actually part of the solution to get out of this vicious circle that we're talking about. And for secondary education, it is not only to complete secondary to go to university, but secondary education as a main pathway to work for the majority of young people in the continent. So a different mindset to secondary education as compared to what you see out there, a lot of young people finishing and ending up in the streets. I think there is a different way to do it. And that's part of what we are trying to do. Thank you.
So soon we're going to turn to questions from our audience. So as a reminder, there's the QR code you can use to access the question platform. And actually, I would ask somebody to help me with the iPad, which has lost connection. So I'm going to need some help with the iPad here in order to get everyone's questions. So I want to turn to impact measurement, which has been brought up by our speakers this morning. As a journalist who has written about education in the United States, I know sort of the sources of data collection that I can use to understand what's going on in education. In the education collaboration space, how would you say the quality of impact measurement and data collection is? What, Dr. Savage, could you give us your impressions on impact measurement in the space and data collection.
I think over the last 10, 15 years, we've not only grown the amount of understanding of education impact and the culture of evidence in education, but we've come to use data for political and policy shifts in some countries in a way that is really demonstrating the importance and power of learning. And so there have been shifts. There have been shifts from best efforts and believing, I've heard many organizations talking about a shift to measuring learning outcomes and finding ways to measure learning outcomes that have changed their entire DNA and changed the way that they're working. And I think that did come as a bit of a shock and surprise to some. The sort of back in 2015, back in 2000, we were obviously always talking about learning and not just access. That's always been the point. So I think there's been huge progress. I think the one thing I worry a little bit about is that a lot of the drive for impact assessment and a lot of the funding for it comes externally. And again, I'm coming from the perspective of someone who's worked to try to support external funders to provide their funding in a way that is supportive of national priorities. And I look forward to a world in which the accountability flow is not for organizations to measure impact and then report that back to donors, but to flip the entire spectrum in a way, and for funders to be held accountable for providing the right money at the right time in order to support the metrics that are being measured in country and by organizations. That's the journey I hope we're on, and I think we're getting better. But again, to come back to a point that Andreas made earlier, the investment, even though we've got better, compared to the amount of money we spend on education, the amount of money we still spend on research and data is incredibly small. I worked in a then DFID team that was starting out an education research investment portfolio. Education was the second biggest bilateral spend area, and we had no education research team. It had been started just before I arrived. We tried to grow that. It was still minuscule compared to investment in health, innovation, and science. And we're still at a point, I think, in impact measurement and in education where the top journals, we do get education papers into the top economics journals, into the top economic conferences, but still not as much as we probably should.
You would think as an investor, you would want to know whether you're getting your money's worth and whether the money is actually being effectively allocated. Well, before we get to questions, I want to ask one more question of our panelists, myself. So we've talked about collaborations, cross-sector collaborations, and some of their strengths, weaknesses, pathologies. If you could imagine an ideal future architecture for collaborations going forward in education, what would that look like? Dr. Materu?
All right, thank you. I think I'll go back where I started. It should be collaboration around a challenge and with clarity among the collaborating parties on what outcomes we are seeking to achieve, and let each one participating use the systems they have to contribute to that, one. But very important is to see that the collaboration is contributing to a challenge and a solution to a problem that has come from the ground, not that the funders think is the problem. And here I must say that it's something we learned when we were starting our strategy, Young Africa Works. And we sat in rooms and we talked among ourselves. But then at some point we said, let's go and talk to the young people themselves, and the governments on the ground and the other stakeholders, to understand what is it that is most important to them. And the perspective we got from the ground, from the young people, and their own definition of what would make them feel dignified and fulfilled, opened our eyes. And in fact, the definition we use is not one that we came up with. It's not coming out of sophisticated algorithms developed by academics, but rather the young people themselves. And every time we go back we ask the young people, is what we are doing leading to dignified and fulfilling work? And last year we ran through all the countries where we work, asking again, and only 70% of them say they feel that what we are doing is leading to dignified and fulfilling work. The others said, we are on that journey, but we are not there yet. Yeah, and this is what we take as the impact of our work. Yeah? If we had taken a sophisticated university team to go and do randomized controlled trials, I don't know what the outcome would have been, but definitely it would be different. But I think it's so important to listen to those that we are seeking to impact, to understand how is it working for them. Yeah, and thirdly, the government and others who are leading in that space, we have to work in such a way that we are complementing what they're already doing, rather than working in parallel with them. Finally, it's about data for evidence and also to inform not us, but to help us, those on the ground who are doing the work to do it better. Yeah? And I'm saying this because data has become gold. The way we collect data and the way we manage data is extremely important and increasingly more important in the future of AI. Because once you've got this huge arsenal of data and you've got the computing capacity, you have got control. And I think as we collaborate going forward, we need to make sure that those on the ground that you are seeking to impact have ownership of that data and have a say, in fact, a leading say in how that data is utilized, empowering those on the ground with that capability should be part and parcel of our collaborations. Thank you.
So let me turn to some of the audience questions. Thank you very much. So one person asked, when we talk about collaboration to ensure scalability, does it always need government intervention? How effective are NGOs or NPOs in leading change to scale initiatives?
I would like to share on this question. Let me share with you a truly living example linked to this summit and to Price Foundation, to Eden Foundation, of what collaboration and partnership can bring to education transformation. This example is linked to the prize that will be awarded tomorrow to my fellow citizen, Mamadou Ly. When I was Minister of Education of Senegal, Mamadou came to my office to present his project to improve literacy and foundational learning through the use of our national languages. At that time, his initiatives was mainly supported by Dubai Care. I immediately recognized its potential, endorsed the project, and decided to scale it up by integrating it into the government strategic education plan. Together with other programs financed by GPE, we expanded Mamadou's project to 7 out of 14 regions and 3 national languages in Senegal, using resources from the national budget of Senegal and from USAID. Today, the introduction of national languages in early learning covers all 14 regions of Senegal and 8 languages across the country. This is a concrete, living example of what collaboration can achieve partnership between a government, a national NGO, ARED, led by Mamadou, international philanthropy, Dubai Care, multilateral, bilateral partner, USAID, and multilateral partnership, GPE. Mamadou's project is now also supported by Gate Foundations. And with the award of the Hidden Prize to Mamadou, the Hidden Prize Foundation becomes a new cornerstone of this remarkable journey of collective success, of synergy unleashed.
Let me ask another question from our audience. One person asked, beyond initial funding, what's one financial or non-financial thing that you've seen sustain a successful partnership in the long run? Dr. Savage?
The mandate to partner. And I think that's one of the things that can often hold partnership and collaboration back. I mean, I've had said to me sometimes by some of our members that they're not allowed to collaborate. Their mandate is not to collaborate. It will dilute their impact if they collaborate. So I think those who are and who believe in, like as Peter says, those who believe in the power of collaboration, who believe that they cannot do it alone, that sense of mission and mandate to work with others, whether that's with other funders, with government, with civil society, if you don't have that, and you're going to continue to believe that you're only going to have impact if you fund the organization that you want to fund and you fund an impact evaluation only of that, then that's a massive, either enabler or restrictor.
Let me ask one more question from our audience about advocacy. We know that education is the investment we need in a better future. How do we make sure other people are on the same page and take action towards making that investment? Dr. Maduro?
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think first I must say there is a lot that is happening already, and we must acknowledge the fact that at least in Africa, where I know the numbers well, governments are putting a significant portion of their national budgets into education already. Yeah, many are in the 15 to 20%, some more than 20% of their annual expenditure goes into education. It is more about the size of the challenge. That is what calls for collaboration. But we need to acknowledge, first of all, the leadership is not coming from us outside who are putting in some money. Most of it is being done by the governments themselves. So that is important. Now, having said that, I think it is so important that we, first of all, we have opportunities like here where we can share what is happening, but also we need to have the evidence. And this is at the point around data, evidence to show what is already happening, what works, and what we should do less of if we can. Yeah. So data for evidence is an important thing for advocacy. Advocacy, just talking about it by itself, will not be enough. We need evidence because the resources are becoming tighter, and so showing that by putting in a little bit, we can achieve a lot of impact will convince many more to come around. The second thing that I would emphasize is that from an advocacy point of view, we need to talk less about, at least for my organization, it's less about announcing what we are going to do, but rather sharing what works. And also sharing what did not work so that others don't make those mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's all the time we have for our discussion, so please join me in thanking our panelists.